for everybody who's obviously joining us today, welcome and thanks for joining us for the Coffee with Modena Series 2. We're really pleased that you could be joining us today, where obviously we'll be discussing all things Autodesk and in the industry and what's happening. So I just want to introduce our team very quickly. We've got Michiel, who's our technical manager, Ahmed, as well as Amanda, which again, she's having some technical issues, and then Katie's in the background, who's the director of Modena Infrastructure. Most of you will obviously know that Modena Design Centers is the only Autodesk Platinum partner in South Africa, which is obviously the highest level of certification an Autodesk partner can achieve. So the Platinum tier recognizes Autodesk partners like ourselves who deliver the highest levels of value to our customers by demonstrating rich industry expertise, fulfilling different demands in things like the training, the certification requirements, but also sustaining the highest level of customer satisfaction. So thank you for being Modena customers. But for us at Modena, we allow our clients' passion to flourish by removing all frustrations associated with introducing new technologies and workflows. Whilst assisting our clients, we would also like to make sure that our clients get the best in maintaining competitive advantage and letting Modena help you to deliver better projects. So today's discussions around what we're actually doing is about understanding about where Autodesk is, what realm they're playing in, the new technologies that have been associated with Autodesk. And I know there's been some awesome topics that the guys have come up with. So that's why we've had our Coffee at Modena Series 2 extended so that we can have a discussion. And I know Michiel's going to start us off with a couple of questions for the panel to have a chat about. But also for all our guests, if you have any questions, something you'd like to know about or something you've heard that's been quite intriguing to yourself, share it with us. You know, that's why we're having this session today anyway. Oh, and I see Warwick has also joined us today. Thanks, Warwick. Okay,
I've got a major questions.
Let's just get it started.
No, so I mean, part of it is the conversation is open to everyone. So if any one of the attendees do have a question, pop it in, we chat about it and things like that. Yeah, no, so in kind of preparation for this kind of session, I was actually had an interesting conversation with one of my ex-clients that immigrated to the UK. I think everyone now knows someone that's moved across the pond. Let's call it that. And she basically asked me a question is like, what is BIM and can I do BIM? And you know, from my point of view, it felt like a funny question or stupid question, but the reality is it's a normal question, I think. Ahmed, I don't know if you can relate to that kind of question or if people ask you the same thing.
Definitely. And it's been going around for a while. A lot of questions coming in. My answer is always sort of similar in the sense that we are already using BIM to an extent. We just need the right or the correct workflow guidance to take it forward. So, and that's why I do believe that us assisting our clients with that really brings out their true potential and allows them to pick the fruits of doing actual or proper BIM.
I think before we deep dive into that statement, Ahmed, maybe from the panelists kind of point is, if you had to summarize BIM in one sentence, what would it be? Ahmed, we want to start with you. So you're an A. Are you on mute, eh?
Thank you. So, BIM in one sentence. Building information modeling. I feel like BIM should be or is a collaborative data process using 3D models to enable efficient design, construction, operation. Yeah, I think I'll do that. So building information modeling is a data process using 3D models to achieve efficient design, communication, and among stakeholders. How about that?
Perfect. Warwick, your side?
I would say BIM, in a sense, for me, is transparent and collaborative communication for better project delivery.
Cool. No? Let's see if your mic works.
Yes.
There we
That's
go.
great news.
Okay. So for me, when concerned with interior design, is definitely the real-time collaboration.
Cool. Michael?
Yeah, it actually encompasses everything there. It's about, call it BIM, building information modeling, which is obviously an intelligent 3D process that gives all architectural, engineering, construction professionals really the insight and tools to become more efficient through the design, construct, and managing the building and infrastructure process.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks, Michael. So I think before I give my answer, and I don't think anyone here is incorrect, I think it's quite vague. Sorry, Katie, can you maybe just check the chat is still disabled for everyone else? So the guys are popping it in the Q&A section, some of the questions.
Yeah, we're having a problem
Yeah.
with the other ones. We're going to use the Q&A.
Okay. So guys, please pop it in the Q&A. I've got it open here, so I'll check in on that front and start answering after this. So interesting enough, just coming back to what is BIM, it actually, a little bit of history, it started back in about the 1980s. The first concept of BIM came about. And that's more or less when the first computers was, call it, I wouldn't say personal computers, but where universities started having computer centers and stuff like that. The guy who developed the concept, really what his intent was behind BIM was a 3D model with information attached to it to open up visibility of what that data is to the rest of the consultants. So I agree with all you guys, transparency, collaboration, database-driven information. But it's actually, for me, it's simple. The answer personally for me is simple to say BIM is just a 3D model with information, right? And how that is shared with everyone else. And that I think is, call it today and age, people have overcomplicated BIM with, call it the dimensions, the BIM uses and all the software and the capabilities and I don't know what else. But yeah, so that's a little bit of my take on it. So there is a comment on that. So anonymous attendee, I mean, that's a unique name and surname. I've never come across that person. Basically asked the question, what about database drawings for ENCI and PNIDs and feed? So I don't know what feed is, but that is actually, in my mind, also BIM, call it that, right? We do sell a lot of times that BIM is Revit. BIM is, all these fancy 3D tools like Revit, and it's being pushed down the line from everywhere. The reality is plant 3D, civil 3D, to a very limited extent, AutoCAD can function as a BIM platform. I don't know, any comments from anyone else?
Michiel, I agree with you there. I think it's more like people understanding exactly where the benefits are within BIM. I think one of the guys, Heinrich, here is actually, Wickham just posted in chat, said BIM has become an essential tool for the modern construction projects. I agree with that, but it's not just for the construction projects per se. It's actually for everybody. I mean, with the different technologies that we do actually have available to us, it's about ensuring that, that ISO 19650 is achieved right across every discipline. We do understand that it's a newish international standard for information management, but I think it's about understanding exactly the role it plays and everybody's role within that realm.
Also, just want to jump in there. Oh, sorry, Matteo.
No, go ahead, Warwick.
I was just looking at some of the comments here, and there's one comment from Heinrich saying, BIM has become an essential tool for modern construction projects. And I think the building information modeling is known in the industry, but I don't think anyone really recognizes BIM as building information management. And, you know, construction companies are now able to benefit from managing the data for better project delivery on their projects, you know, versus their traditional paper-based project methodologies. You know, it's something to really consider going forward, as, you know, digital adoption is really going to start creating an efficient way for project delivery going forward.
So you said something interesting there, and I think I'll let Ahmed elaborate more on this, is, and it ties into Heinrich's comment that BIM is an essential tool. BIM is actually a framework and a process. The tools we use to deliver on that will differ. And if you look at Darren's comment, is finally Civil 3D is also recognized. I think that's part of an industry misconception. It's always been recognized, but we didn't look at it because Civil, your infrastructure guys have a different view of that. Ahmed, I don't know your take on that, the framework portion.
Definitely, I do believe that it's a framework rather, and more so on the practical side. And I just want to elaborate a little bit more on what Warwick was saying with regards to the construction industry, having the contractors the ability to access these models, these items or information from the design team, you know, in real time, the ability to check coordination, the ability to maybe save a little money here and there, the ability to track the assets as well. So definitely, I think if the entire team has the ability to get on board, the better for the project.
Yeah, perfect. So I just want to quickly answer a question here from, it's in the Q&A. What is the standard BIM? What is the standards BIM ensures we adhere to? So I think the question is more, what standards do we want to adhere to? With a question mark for the ISO 19650. So that is the local standard that's being passed through. So effectively, I think it was last year, November, part 1 of ISO 19650 has been accepted into the SAST standards. More recently, part 2 has been approved, so the documentation is not out yet as a standard for SABS or SANS, but that is the standard we are working with. And actually, I'll pop it in the chat, but the BIM community Africa is very much a driving force behind getting those standards into South Africa. Yeah, so we got those items. Then Crystal Bauer.
Before you ask Crystal's one, I'm going to actually ask our lead auditor, Ahmed. He's obviously the very first lead assessor within ISO 19650 in South Africa. Ahmed, how have you actually been finding the implementation of companies and understanding about ISO 19650? How have you been finding that adoption from the clients?
It's a slow adoption process, but people are on board with it nonetheless. For those of us who are a little bit confused about the ISO 19650, as we were all, I suppose, at one stage, because it can be overwhelming. There's a lot of literature out there with regards to it as well. What is it actually about? And I think if I can put it into a short description, ISO 19650 basically is international standard for managing information over the life cycle of the project, over the life cycle of buildings, infrastructure. It provides, the standard provides guidelines for us for effective data management, data organization, collaboration, documentation, during the construction and operational phases of this project. So what I think ISO 19650 promotes, and I'd like your comments on this as well, it seems to promote, well, it's there to promote efficient information exchange between the stakeholders of a project, ensuring, I think, better project outcomes, reducing waste, and reducing miscommunication within the construction industry.
for us less smart people and less educated people, if I had to kind of summarize what Ahmed was saying is, it's the data management. Now that sounds like a very complicated term, but it's effectively a 3D component, a 2D component, reference as, and we talk about the 3D component as graphical, the 2D metadata as non-graphical. So that's your attributes in AutoCAD or Civil 3D. In Revit, that's your parameters as non-graphical. And then even part of that is drawings as supplementary information. So, and that's effectively, how do you manage these 3D models with all the relevant information as a collaboration process? And when he talks about the process, it goes from design to construction. How do you transfer information from one stage to another? And then once you start hitting operations or facility management, is how do you transfer these assets then into the facility management side of you? I hope that makes sense for the less educated people like myself.
Makes sense to me. So yeah, definitely. But yeah, you had a good question there actually from Crystal. So if you wanted to share that one, Michiel.
Yeah, so this is a nice question. I like it because it is a hot topic. For designers who are doing workshop drawings, they don't have Revit and the project is designed with Revit, what other software would you suggest to view the model and at a cost perspective? So to me, there's two sides of this. And I'll let Amanda maybe deal with some of these questions, some of my points. So there's a 3D model viewing component to read and understand that information. That talks to what we've mentioned on the sharing side. And then there's the cost component of how do you actually, well, the perspective of costs. So Amanda, maybe first on the model viewing, what would you recommend there as an idea? The mute button is in the Zoom.
Okay, so definitely, for interior designers, 3D visualization is very important. And, BIM allows us to better understand the space that we're working with and to present our ideas more effectively. Yeah.
From a viewing platform, is there any platform you would recommend guys to maybe look at for 3D models?
So, of recent, Revit has, Autodesk has introduced Twin Motion as part of the, a standard Revit software. And what it does is it creates a direct link into, clients being able to directly go onto Twin Motion. And of course, then once you're there, you're able to have to do real-time changes when you're with your clients. And yeah.
Michiel, from our side, I think it's a little bit that it's software agnostic. Amanda, do me a favor, put yourself on mute, please. That is software agnostic. I know that we're using the Autodesk docs as a common data environment, as well as the guys also sharing Navisworks folders and files or using Plannerly. I think it's just the most important part is about the communication. Sometimes it's not always about the software, it's about the tool, the different tool capabilities that also Autodesk solutions offer. I think there's about 80 to 90 different file formats that the common data, the Autodesk Construction Cloud common data environment allows. So, it literally, I think it also depends on the setup and what the clients are expecting.
Yeah. So I see Dustin Quintini kind of gave a suggestion there as well, the Autodesk viewer. For the guys that don't know, that's a free viewer that you can just upload a Revit model CADs and PDFs and share that link with people. So that's a good suggestion. And then on the costing side, he recommended Sigma Estimates. And for the people who's not aware of that, that is, it'll allow you to pull the quantities, 3D quantities from Revit, and it'll allow you to estimate against that. Yeah, thanks for those suggestions, Dustin. Yeah, and then, yeah, so also Darren mentioned Navisworks. You are correct, Darren. Navisworks is also a great tool. It is also there's a free version, so you can definitely look at that as a viewer in itself. And then actually there's the other cloud platforms like Autodesk Construction Cloud and BIM 360 that can also look at those items. Yeah, if I go back to the Q&A, there was another question right at the beginning, and I actually like this question because I still get it quite often. How popular is 3D scanning being integrated to 3D modeling? I don't know, who wants to take that question?
I won't be able to answer that, Michelle, but I had a discussion with one of my clients recently where there was some huge interest on his side and from his client side to look at refurbs that don't have any plans, any drawings, and then use a point cloud scanner to take the sites into a 3D model, and then from that start designing what the end product would look like. Just affording the guys the ability to start planning ahead and saving time with, you know, the traditional way of measuring out a site with pen and paper and lasers and measuring tapes. So from my side, I've seen quite a big increase from clients requesting the service just to speed up the time on measuring your sites.
Cool, thanks, Warwick. Yeah, so a little bit more on the technical side. 3D scanning has been, I mean, it's not a new technology. It's been around for quite some years, and it's actually been, I almost want to say it's like a norm. These days, it feels like I have to walk into a client's firm and they haven't really dealt with it in some way as being kind of unique. So I do know there's still quite a lot of guys that haven't really played with 3D scanning. And if you haven't, I do recommend, you know, start investigating the technology. It is quite expensive to some degree, but you also get quite nice and cheap alternatives. If you are a Apple fan like myself, you actually do find that the latest iPhones and Apple devices, you can actually scan very high, very good mesh quality with your phone itself. So there's some quite cool stuff happening with the 3D scanning side. And it's useful. It does speed up the time. Wherever we get part of as-built projects, we don't do hand measurements or anything like that. We only operate on a 3D scan environment.
So, Michiel, for the uneducated like us, some of us, shall I say, I had a question posed to me actually the other day from a client who was actually saying, well, Mike, how does 3D scanning all integrate into this whole world of digital twin? What is it, and what is the representation? How can it benefit me and my company? So, for the non-familiars, can you elaborate, or yourself or Ahmed, a little bit more in terms of what is a digital twin and what is the benefits of utilizing things like 3D scanning?
Ahmed, do you feel comfortable? You want to tackle digital twin?
Oh, why not? So digital twin, virtual representation of the physical object. In short, well, it can also be the data from sensors, simulations, other sources to create your real-time interactive model. Digital twins basically enable us to monitor, analyze, optimize the corresponding physical entity. So offering insights into performance, potential improvements into our buildings. So digital twin, your virtually created asset, and then the asset. My hands are not in the camera. There we go. Digital twinning.
Okay, so is that just for the AEC industry, or do you think that the manufacturing industry has also been benefiting from it as well?
Definitely.
So interesting enough, a few years ago, I was doing a project for a mining client of ours. well, the designers doing the mining project. And back then, the mining industry was already creating digital twins. They never called it digital twins. And in reality is, so if I had to simplify the conversation of what a digital twin is, I think everyone is familiar about Fitbit or your Samsung watch or your Apple watch that effectively tracks your steps and your heart rate and things like that. That is, to a very small portion, a digital twin of yourself. Anything that gives you information about how your performance is or could look like, that is what a digital twin is. Now, we make these fancy words in the AEC industry or the construction industry and want to give it a nice little label, so hence the digital twin. So in most cases, when you see digital twin, they do market it for buildings because it feels like it's the easiest thing we can relate to. But the reality is, if you can put a sensor data on it, if you can track it in some sort of manner, then it becomes a digital twin. And like Ahmed correctly said, it doesn't have to be a physical representation. So it doesn't have to be your Revit or Civil 3D model that functions as a digital twin. It could just be the metadata around it. Call it speeding cameras creates digital twin for the average speed of vehicles driving on a road. Things like that. So it becomes this loose term of what is a digital twin, but at the end of the day, it's about what is the information you need to track the longevity of your building or the performance of your asset, actually more so than the building. Does it make sense, or did I confuse everyone more?
No, it's all good. And I've also just found a nice article that's actually quite easily explained as well for the ones who didn't quite grasp it.
Cool. Any other
I think
topics
you
you
hit
guys
the nail
want to
on
chat
the head
about?
there, Michiel. Thank you for that.
No problem, Ahmed. I know I've left you too long at clients. You don't know how to talk to people anymore.
There we go. I've just become a robot now, a digital twin of myself.
Can you touch a bit on BIM, drones and BIM, please? That's an interesting question, Darren. Warwick, since you're a construction expert, let's talk about drones and the usage.
Funny story about drones. So I had a meeting yesterday about how construction companies are able to take 360-degree photos and track the progress of the sites, just from project start to project completion, just so they have a track record of what's happened throughout the project lifecycle. And the client yesterday mentioned, can we start using drones for this? And I said, absolutely, why not? The only issue I find with drones on construction projects is, when the project is in its infancy, it's easy to take photos of open space. But when you start putting facades on buildings and you start closing the actual building up, it's going to be quite difficult for you to start taking photos of the inside of the building using drones. So, we just need to keep that in mind. But I think for civil projects and for road development projects, drone footage would be absolutely perfect. Just to take photos of big areas and then continuously keep track of, site progress on the site itself. Picture speaks 1,000 words.
It's nice what you're saying is the drones are great for open spaces. And it kind of goes back to every tool has its purpose. So once you start closing up the building, what is a tool to measure or track that internal components?
Really nice 360-degree cameras. They have 280-degree fisheye lenses. Most sports 360-degree cameras will work, but it's also about making sure that there's a proper floor plan and, the person taking photos understand how to read the plan. If you have those two, the recipe is quite easy. But yeah, what we've seen massive success, especially with consultants that are doing work all over the country and internationally, is they are able to send a camera to a project, set it up on site with their foreman or whoever's managing the project on the daily, and then just take daily photos at set locations in a room or wherever they deemed a photo to be taken. And it's just nice for the consultants or the construction companies, to visually see what's going on site without having to be on site permanently. I wouldn't recommend that guys look at this as a permanent solution to remove themselves off a project, but definitely a way to start looking at reducing travel costs, because when you're looking at the PNGs on construction projects, one of those would be travel costs, accommodation, time spent on the road. And, with the margins being where they are, 2, 3, 4%, if we can start implementing tools like this that can take the project site to the office and bring down the PNG costs, it might make construction companies a little bit more lucrative in the market, to make their costs lower while they're still delivering the same project. So it is something to think about. It is something I've been talking to a lot of clients about. But when things are new, construction industry doesn't like change because of the risks involved. So hopefully it gets adopted soon. But it is something that we as an industry need to start looking at in terms of managing our projects.
Quite actually
Thanks,
interesting
Warwick.
you said that, Warwick. Sorry, Michiel. About you also mentioning about a lot of the guys in the construction industry. I've had a few queries from clients regarding a hollow builder and how that's actually impacting the construction industry, because I know that there has been some discussions with a lot of the guys within the building services industry around, obviously, that you're mentioning about the drones and stuff, but also, we've got to look at the, what is the current laws in South Africa specifically around getting an RPL, which is a remote pilot license, especially if it's going to be for commercial use. So, I always just say, just make sure we just double check what the legality is behind it if you're going to be utilizing drones for a commercial or personal usage, and also area, because, if you like someone like a SAST or something, they're not just going to allow somebody to fly on there with a drone. So, there's definitely benefits, but there's also potential pitfalls as well. So we need to just be very careful about that as well.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. So Warwick, there was a few interesting conversation pointers you brought up that I'd like to elaborate on. So when we talk about drones, effectively that is a camera taking photos or a video, right?
Yeah.
There's no intelligence behind it. And the product you were referring to going more into the building that we're referencing is Hollow Builder here, which takes a 360 photos. So to kind of go back to Darren's original question, how does drone and BIM come together? So for me, is if you take the Hollow Builder as a product solution, and there's others for drones that are similar, is I can take my Navisworks model or my Revit model effectively and compare it with the site photo and see that what is needed to be visible or not visible. And what's nice about something like Hollow Builder or the other platforms is your photos is actually like the entire project history almost. So you can see from the moment they just started the structural or the column, the framework, the structural elements, to up until when they started doing in the finishes, and compare that with the model. That to me talks about BIM in the field. Having that data available for the contractor or the project manager or the client or whoever the case might be.
Phil, just to jump in there with the 360-degree photos and having access to your project history, there was a user case in the States where a building burned down, and unfortunately there were a couple of fatalities. And the fire engineer was taken to court because obviously it was deemed that he didn't do his job. And luckily, through the use of Hollow Builder and the ability to backtrack the progress photos, he was able to prove that he did install the fire louvers as per spec. Maybe the job card was missing, or some sort of information that was a physical piece of paper was lost. But having access to those photos actually saved him, and it proved that the work that he said he did actually happened. And that's why I always go back to saying, picture speaks 1,000 words. And then back to your Hollow Builder. So Hollow Builder actually does offer a drone add-on with GPS coordinates. So you'll just need to set your initial X and Y. And then as you fly, you put it into something called video mode, and you can set the intervals. So every 3, 5, 10, 15 seconds, it will auto take photos. And if your drone technology is clever enough, you can auto plot that flight route for your next take, so that your drone will auto fly that route, taking photos at the same conditions that it took previous captures at.
Pretty cool. Another nice little show or showcase around, call it drones and photogrammetry and BIM is so with drones and the footage, you can actually create point clouds from that. Naturally, there's a given accuracy, but then you can use that point clouds to also measure progress against your 3D models. Yeah, so Darren, you are hitting your, so the last two questions for the guys that aren't aware of it. So to fly drones in South Africa, you do actually need almost like a pilot license to fly drones. So it's not just anyone buys a drone from Macro or wherever and just go out and fly it. It's actually very much illegal. So there's that little component to be aware of. So remote operating certificate. Thanks for that, Darren, is our ROC. And then on the recap side is your drone images. And that's what I was referring to is you can take these images and actually create a mesh file, which you can then convert into a point cloud to bring into AutoCAD or Revit or whatever the case might be, and actually model from that. Yes, it does require tokens because it does use cloud technology or processing power to actually generate those mesh files and things for you. But yeah, I actually find the whole scan or photogrammetry to BIM workflow is actually quite interesting. And like I mentioned, you can actually do it with your phone these days, so you don't need fancy tools to get some of the stuff working. Any questions or comments from the panelists?
No, I actually think you're right there, Michiel. At the moment, I think there's so many digital technologies actually out there at the moment. It's, you know, the big, what shall I say, is probably the right word. The big talk at the moment is about Forma, which I know that you guys have been doing a lot of presentations on, and we've been having a lot of discussions with our clients about Forma. But it's not just about that, it's also about the other, call it emerging technologies. You know, if it's things like your digital manufacturing or your smart manufacturing side of your technologies, but also where the extended reality, AR, VR, and even your mixed reality all comes into it. It's, you know, there's a lot of these immersive technologies, and I think sometimes it can be a little bit overwhelming to a lot of clients knowing, you know, what do we use, how do we use it, you know, especially for real-time collaboration or getting sustainable, accessible information for future. I mean, where do you see the whole Forma fitting into all of this?
I don't know. Ahmed, do you want to answer? Amanda?
I think I'm going to give this one to Amanda or to you, Michiel. But basically, I haven't played with it a lot, but I did a little bit of research on the Forma, which was formerly Spacemaker back then. We were looking into it for urban designers, and usually for the ability to track the sun path, heat, you know, what else was it was wind as well. So just to track all this data, it was something that we're looking into. Again, with Forma, I haven't played with it, but I do know that Forma is what was formerly Spacemaker. So I would assume that they do have the same operations. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, so just in a nutshell, Forma is a rebrand of Spacemaker. Effectively, Autodesk is rebuilding it to integrate better with their product. So it's not all the features you had in Spacemaker, but they are building it towards that level. So the initial launch of Forma includes your sustainability analysis, what you're referring to with winds and solar and stuff like that. And it does high-level generative calculations around what is the best suited building layout, and etc. for your area. And that kind of talks to Heinrich. Amanda, I don't know if you've got anything to add to generative design.
I'm all right, thanks, Neil.
So generative design it's actually interesting enough, been around since about 2006, the concept of generative design. And the simplest form of kind of the way I can explain it is, when you as a designer, you have so many inputs you have to contend with, client requirements, governmental requirements, project requirements, site items, etc. So all these inputs, as a human, you kind of take this into your mind and you start processing and refining your design. So let's take office building. So you got a site, and we've got an offset that you're allowed to build from the edges of the boundary. So, and we've got an FIR and a coverage for the architects out there that knows those items. That basically gives you what your maximum building footprint can be on your site. So once you have that as an input, now you can start redefining this design. So now we got the sustainability requirements from South Africa as a local government, where you're only allowed to have a certain amount of window openable areas or minimum and things like that. Now, all of these design requirements, as a designer, you basically start using all this information to get to a form, to get to a building, to get to something that you can present to a client. So from a generative design point of view, if I define all of those as inputs and restrictions, then effectively I have a computer that can generate multiple designs for me. And I'm not saying they're good, I'm not saying they're bad. It's a hybrid of the full spectrum. So you'll get definitely from the worst case to the absolute best case. But that's the point, is you as a designer can now simplify your design environment and actually just decide which designs are really close to what you envision this building or design should look like. And then from there, you can actually refine it more to get to something that will work for this project requirements. So kind of to summarize that is, define your inputs and outputs, and then a computer does all the heavy lifting and you do the fun stuff. I hope that helps.
It's been insightful, actually, because especially in the AEC industry, I mean, my background is obviously the manufacturing side, and it was quite a lot utilized within that industry. So it's actually been quite informative, actually seeing how it's actually benefiting the AEC industry, to be fair.
Yeah, and I don't want to talk about AI, but if you saw some of the newer AI tools out there, they call it generative AI, and it works on the same principle. As you define the inputs and outputs, and then AI will actually develop this kind of concepts for you, or fill in the blank pieces and do the heavy lifting. So as a question, right, for the last 10 minutes, I think, no, instead of a question, I want the panelists just to go through it and give me their little thoughts, not elaborate, but their thoughts on AI in the construction industry.
Yeah, we pick any topic.
AI in the construction industry, just your thoughts of what it is going to do for our industry.
Good and bad. So I saw a video recently where there was a little robot. It was about the size of a loaf of bread, if you can put it into scale. And basically what this thing did was you uploaded a 2D floor plan to this little robot. You threw some chalk into it, and this thing drove around site, busy marking out your walls and your doors and your partitioning lines. So when the guys get to site, all of your chalk lines have been set out so the guys can quickly get going on the project. So in that sense, quicker project delivery, but then we also need to balance project delivery efficiency against labor relations, and we don't want to risk people's work through the implementation or use of AI. So there needs to be a balance, and I think that's where guys are getting scared now, is I'm going to lose my job because of AI. And maybe the comment should be, I'm not going to lose my job, through AI, but I will lose my job if I don't, adapt or implement AI tools on my projects.
Cool. Yeah, I love that little robot. I think it's like a huge time saver, right?
It's so much fun. It's so much fun.
Who's next?
I got a question. Could we brand products like HoloBuilder, the scanners, as artificial intelligence on site, scanning the photos for us automatically without us physically going and taking those 360-degree views and photos and lining them up with the actual virtual models as well? I do believe that that could be branded as AI as well. So that would mean that we're already using AI in the construction industry.
So HoloBuilder, not so much that I'm aware of. I don't think they're really running algorithms in the background or made it publicly available. But so we're not aware of that. But if you look at something like Autodesk Build, and if you take a photo with your phone on site, in the office, whatever the case might be, in Autodesk Build's photo app, Autodesk called it auto tagging, where they actually look at the photo and they're trying to identify elements within that photo and then tag based on that. So that's AI, right? In a nutshell. And to that point, yeah, sorry, Warwick, you wanted to add something there?
Yeah. What about Construction IQ? I think it's a really nice tool, but I really haven't heard anyone talking about it in the industry.
So for the guys not knowing what Construction IQ is, that's basically Autodesk AI running in the background, and that effectively does project risk analysis. How much AI goes in there, I don't know, but the idea is from a project level or company level, they can identify which projects or companies or subcontractors or whatever the case might be has potentially the highest risk on a project, or health and safety issues on a project and things like that. So I think there's still a lot of data that needs to be gathered in that space for it actually relatively useful in our industry, but it's a good starting point, and it is there analyzing information in the background. Michael, your take on AI in the industry?
No, look, for me, it's massive. In terms of building services, we hear about the guys always talking about the different technologies out there, but for me, especially around generative AI, about how it's actually transforming the actual global industry. I mean, I think I read an article, I think it was Forbes or something, it mentioned that specifically in the construction industry, it was going to affect about 300 million jobs around AI. In a more positive thing, rather than people thinking, oh, well, is some robot now going to be taking over my job? No, it's not actually. It's about actually an industry that's almost been stagnating in terms of productivity over the last few decades, where we had very minimal growth. Now we've actually got a digital solution or a technology now that is helping the construction industry's complete GDP grow. And, so in terms of exponential growth, for me, I love what it brings.
Amanda, your take on AI?
So for me, AI, just to sum it up, definitely brings up more efficiency. However, in terms of people being nervous about, like Michael said, taking over their jobs, etc. AI still is limited. It's limited to input, right? Whereas we have that human touch, the emotionally, and all that is still necessary for a project. And I think it can be a balance of the two.
I love that, the human touch. You're not going to get that, even though the Chinese are trying to make cuddle buddies. I don't think it's the same.
But I feel, this is something I've spoken to a lot of people about, and it's not AI, it's just about technology adoption in the industry. So a lot of guys are reluctant to adopt any sort of digital change. And I always go back to smoke signals, a pigeon, the fax, and an email, right? So all four of those are perfectly okay uses to deliver a message. You know, we can send smoke signals, we can send a handwritten letter on a pigeon, we can send a fax, we can send an email. But on one end of the scale, one is super inefficient and maybe a bit confusing, where on the other end of that scale, we have the most efficient way of communicating via email. So it's all about saying to yourselves, to your clients, whatever the case is, you know, there's nothing wrong with change. There's nothing wrong with adoption. You know, it's just, are you looking at efficiency? Are you scared of change? Why are you scared? And then always refer back to, you used a fax 10 years ago. Why aren't you using a fax machine now? Because emails are just better. You know, there's proof behind that. And if people just relate all of their worries back to that, I've found that it just makes the whole discussion a little bit easier to consume.
I agree with you. I'm going to answer Heinrich's question now. So my take has always been, it's a new technology. What scares us is we don't know what this technology entails going forward. Where is it going to stop? Where is it not? So if you had a look at the mobile phone when it came out, I was really young. I knew my dad had one. But I think it felt more acceptable buying a cell phone because it made sense as a natural progression going from a landline to a cell phone, right? But AI, we don't understand yet what the transition looks like, what it entails, and where does it go to. And I think that's the biggest scary part, is what does this mean to all of us?
So I feel that's funny you said that there, because actually I remember seeing something with James Cameron mentioning about Skynet. So I think that's, everyone associates with that with Terminator. I think it's, you know, we're all freaking out about it. But again, I agree with you. It's about, you know, it's new in the sense of different technologies for different industries, but there's so much benefit, or so many benefits to the industry, but, you know, capabilities that we never had before that we actually have at our fingertips now. That decision-making process is so much faster. I mean, like we all understand, especially within the world, the growth. I mean, the population of 8 billion people, and there's a massive, massive shortage of homes. You know, and people are migrating now into the cities. It's about those smart cities now. It's about how can we get people the homes, the water, the electricity, call it the infrastructure. You know, this is where AI actually does benefit us.
I agree. So I do want to just quickly touch on Heinrich's comment or question. Do you think AI is adopted faster in the third world countries than first world? So I don't think so. I think it's pretty much the same all around. That is my take on it. However, what I do think is the major difference is third world countries can now compete with first world countries because they've got access to the same information, to the same tools. So it's not, I mean, it's kind of an old way of looking at it, but, you know, call it 20 years ago, we had to wait almost a whole month before a movie released in South Africa. Now it's on the same day globally. But now even more so, you've got an AI tool, no matter where you are in the world, it will give you the same information at the same speed. So I think that's the biggest change from third world countries, is the access to information we have is now on the same speed as the access guys have in first world countries. Then I just, Rabin, I think I'll have to just table yours. I'll send it afterwards. I'm just trying to understand that question a little bit better, so I'll definitely have a chat about that one. I think offline, because we did run out of time here. If there's any other questions you guys do have, don't mind popping us an email. We're happy to address those as we go through.
Before we go, I want to just leave this with
yeah?
you as well. There's a question from Dustin. I knew this one was coming somehow today. It says, how do you guys feel about Dropbox, especially for sharing information with other consultants who use CAD and other software like Revit? I've been waiting for that one all day. So we'll just leave it as that. Exactly.
I hate Dropbox.
Just move along
no,
quickly.
There's different tools for different reasons. So there's nothing wrong with Dropbox in a nutshell. Naturally, for the AC industry, we do rather promote platforms like Autodesk Construction Cloud for documentation sharing and things like that. But yeah, so ladies and gentlemen, we are 1 minute over. So I do thank everyone for joining us on this call, and for your questions and engagements. Really enjoyed it. The comments people made as well, really love it. If there's any other questions you guys do have, please reach out. And then thank you for the panelists, Amanda, Warwick, Michael, and Ahmed for joining us. And then yeah, having a nice conversation.
No, I agree. Thanks, Michiel. Appreciate you hosting this session.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, and if there's anybody's got questions, please let us know.
Via email, not smoke signals, please.
Or a phone call. Structured more likely is going to be smoke signals, buddy.
Alrighty, guys. Cheers, bye.
All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate your time. Have a good Friday.